Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge auf unserem YouTube-Kanal. Herzlich willkommen zurück. Und das läuft quasi wieder unter einer Folge Malibu and Friends, wenn man das so sagen will, aber diesmal wirklich etwas ganz Besonderes. Wir haben heute Steven Whitsitt zu Gast. Das ist der langjährige Fotograf von Michael. Und wir sind sehr, sehr froh, ihn heute hier bei uns zu haben und als Gast dabei zu haben. Und er hat uns gerade natürlich schon gesagt, dass er kein perfektes grammatikalisches Deutsch spricht und es auch nicht extra gelernt hat für unsere Folge. Deswegen werde ich jetzt gleich übergeben, quasi, mich nicht übergeben, sondern das Wort geben an Vanita. Und die wird uns heute durchführen, hier durch diese wunderbare Runde. Matthias ist auch da und ich freue mich sehr darauf. Ja, ich würde sagen, wir starten direkt. Vanita, leg los.
Ja, hallo zusammen. Ich möchte einmal kurz vorwegschicken, ich habe noch nie so simultan Übersetzungen gemacht. Also ich
Mhm.
kann schon Englisch, aber wie gut mein Gehirn dann immer umschalten kann, werden wir sehen. All right, so here we go. Steve, it's so good to have you here. I just told the viewers that it might be a bit glitchy where my brain is trying to switch languages in between because I'm not experienced doing like simultaneously translating in an interview, but we'll make it work, right?
Yes. And actually we had talked in advance that we were going to have some kind of signal for when you wanted me to shut up so you could translate. And we didn't really work that out. So I'm going to just ask you to kind of wave
All
when
right.
you want me to shut up, and I'll try to shut up sometime within 15 or 20 minutes after you wave. Okay?
All right, that'll do. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to do this. I love the fact the that Michael has so many fans around the world and I get to interact with them. That makes me really happy.
Amazing. Thank you. We're so happy you're here. And on the off chance that someone among our viewers or listeners is not sure who you are, could you like introduce yourself a bit, please? Where you're from, what you do?
Okay. My name is Steve Whitsitt, and I grew up in a little town about 60 miles north of Detroit, Michigan. And part of my story is that I just never thought that anything exciting was going to happen in my life. And when I was in the military, I started doing photography and really fell in love with it. It was um, just a just something that I still have a great passion for, whether I'm doing it professionally or just doing it for myself. And that led me to going to college, getting a degree in photography, and through a series of really, really amazing circumstances, I tripped over my feet and one day got asked to be an assistant to Michael Jackson's photographer. And I did that for several years. And then one day, that photographer was no longer working for Michael, and Michael's organization asked me if I would be interested in that job. So that's kind of what brought me here.
Thank you. I'm going to translate for a bit or summarize in German. Also Steve hat uns gerade erzählt, zum einen, dass er sich total darauf freut und gerne mit Fans interagiert und uns ein bisschen eine Einschätzung gegeben, damit alle eine Vorstellung davon haben, wer er eigentlich ist. Also er stammt aus der Nähe von Detroit und während seiner Zeit beim Militär hat er sich quasi in die Fotografie verliebt, da dann auch seinen Uni-Abschluss drin gemacht und ist dann durch eine Reihe positiver Zufälle erstmal der Assistent von Michaels damaligem Fotograf geworden und dann später Michael Jacksons Fotograf selbst. Da fragen wir natürlich gleich noch mal ein bisschen
Ja.
genauer nach.
Glückliche Umstände nennt man das, ne? Das ist,
Genau.
Genau.
ähm, Bevor wir auf den Job eingehen, würde ich jetzt mal erstmal nachfragen, was Steves Einstellungen oder Meinungen zu Michael vorher allgemein waren. Steve, before you came to work with Michael, what did you think about him as an artist, the musician, the illustrator, the creator?
Good question. Well, you can't grow up in the Detroit area, which is, regionally where I grew up, and not, especially in when I grew up, and not be influenced by Motown. Motown was on every radio. It just was omnipresent, um, which I'm anxious to hear the translation for omnipresent into German. Um, and so, and when I was growing up, the Jackson Five had their Saturday morning cartoon, which was delightful, and all of that. So I just kind of they were just sort of like a presence in my life. Just you know, um, they just kind of were. It just seemed like that they were always there. And growing up, I remember I loved the song Ben. That I remember when that came out, and it, I still love that song. I think it's wonderful. Um, and then all of the stuff, and when music video came along and the Thriller video was released, it was just like, oh my God, this is more than just a music video. This is extraordinary. And and of course, I just really like the idea of meeting and working with Michael just seemed a trillion miles outside of the realm of possibilities. And so, initially working as the assistant, it was just sort of very just kind of surreal, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Um, but I eventually, when the first photo shoot that I did with Michael, I got a chance to tell him a story, which I've told many, many times, but I got a chance to tell him a story about being in middle school, and the fact that I kind of was rooting for him then, because there was sort of a competition between the Jackson Five and the Osmond brothers, and I got to tell Michael that I argued with a girl over the whole year in sixth grade over who was cooler, the Jackson Five or the Osmond brothers. And actually, the reaction that you guys are having, Michael just busted up laughing when I told him that, and thought it was the funniest thing. And it it wasn't intended to be um, it wasn't intended to be a way of breaking the ice between him and I. It was just telling him a funny anecdote, but it was something that really broke the ice between him and I think it humanized our interaction and our relationship.
Thank you. Also Steve hat uns gerade erklärt, dass gerade natürlich in der Umgebung von Detroit Motown immer eine riesige Rolle gespielt hat, ständig im Radio war und wie er so schön gesagt hat, omnipräsent war.
Allgegenwärtig.
Dass ja damals die Jackson Five ihre Cartoon-Sendung am Wochenende hatten, dass er den Song Ben damals wahnsinnig geliebt hat, von Thriller und dem Kurzfilm total beeindruckt war. Und als es dann dazu kam, dass er Michael getroffen hat, was er vorher für vollkommen unwahrscheinlich gehalten hat. Also nichts, was sozusagen in seiner Welt stattfinden würde. Hatte ihm wohl die Geschichte erzählt, wie er damals während der Schulzeit auf der Seite der Jackson Five war und eine Mitschülerin, aber auch für die Osmond Brothers, und sie sich das ganze Schuljahr über mehr oder weniger bekriegt haben. Und die Geschichte hat Michael wohl ganz gut gefallen. Er muss sehr gelacht haben, und das hat, auch wenn es jetzt gar nicht mit einem Ziel erzählt war, hat das wohl sehr schön das Eis zwischen den beiden gebrochen. Und da will ich jetzt gleich mal einhaken, wie es zu diesem ersten Treffen überhaupt gekommen ist.
Ja, sehr gerne.
So, Steve, how did it happen? How did that first meeting between you and Michael come about?
So I had been the assistant on at the final leg of the Dangerous tour. And when we came back from the tour, I had met a woman in Brazil, and she had sent me a gift, but instead she didn't have my address, so she sent it to Michael's office. And they called me on the phone and they said, you have a package here, come pick it up. And so I went and picked it up. And when I got there, they said that the photographer that I had worked for at that point about 3 years, that he had been let go. And so I just sort of assumed that since I worked for him directly, that if he was let go, I was let go. And I went around the office and basically said my goodbyes to everybody. And one of the people whose office that I went to was Bob Jones, who was Michael's vice president in charge of communications. And he and I chatted for a little bit. And then a couple of weeks later, he called me on the phone and said, would you be interested in interviewing for the photographer's job? And I was pretty shocked because that's not something that generally in the world of photography, that it's sort of, there's sort of like a ladder process that you walk up. And I was basically jumping from the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder. And I still, to this day, I'm not really exactly sure why that happened or how that happened, but I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity.
Ja.
Right. That sounds amazing. Also Steve war während des letzten Teils der Dangerous Tour schon als Assistent des damaligen Fotografen dabei. Und weil er in Brasilien jemanden kennengelernt hatte und dann ein Päckchen geschickt bekommen sollte, also wie das Leben so spielt quasi, das Päckchen aber quasi keinen Adressaten erstmal finden konnte, also an Michaels Büro geschickt wurde und er das dann abholen musste. Da kriegte er durch Zufall mit, dass eben besagter Fotograf entlassen worden war. Also ist er natürlich davon ausgegangen, dass sein Job damit auch weg war, hat sich bei allen möglichen Leuten verabschiedet, auch bei Bob Jones. Und besagter Bob Jones rief ihn dann aber eine Weile später nochmal an und fragte, ob er nicht diesen Job übernehmen wolle, der da frei geworden ist. Was für Steven eine riesige Überraschung war, um das mal vorsichtig auszudrücken, denn er hat ja quasi die ganzen Zwischenstufen übersprungen. Normalerweise arbeitet man sich so hoch und er kann uns, sagt er, auch nicht so ganz erklären, wie es dazu gekommen ist, aber er ist natürlich dankbar immer noch, heute noch, für die Gelegenheit, die er da bekommen hat.
Und wir auch.
Ja, und wir
Ja.
auch. So, we're all grateful that you got the chance to work with Michael then. Can you tell us a bit more about that first meeting with Michael?
Well, actually, this is a good time to actually refer to the pictures that I sent you, because there is the picture that is Michael holding his chin like this, wearing a dark blue military jacket with gold epaulets on the arms. So the friend that I met in Brazil, she
Ja.
had
Yeah.
there you go, that's the one. She had she was an art collector, and she had just like a museum in her home. It was pretty extraordinary. And she had reached out to me and she said that she had this jacket that she wanted to give to Michael. And so we met up before I flew to New York to do the first test shoot with Michael. And she gave me that, and I brought that with me. And so that photograph is that jacket. It's unfortunate because it was a little bit too small for him. You can tell by where the sleeves come on his arms. But I think that my feeling was that he was impressed that I brought that with me and with the idea of photographing him in that. And we could only do kind of the headshot type pictures or the down to the waist pictures, and he was sort of holding it together. And Michael was not a very bulky guy. So whoever originally owned that Brazilian military jacket must have been teeny tiny, because it didn't really even fit Michael. Um, but so that was one of the things that happened in that very first shoot. Um, I told him the story about the girl from middle school, and he laughed. I was, needless to say, I was very nervous, but I've always, like, philosophically, I've always sort of felt like that my um that I'm supposed to move towards the things that I'm afraid of, and I'm supposed to embrace the things I'm afraid of. And so that was kind of where I was at in my head during that shoot, was that it was like, okay, I'm really nervous about this, but at the same time there was an exhilaration about the idea that it was really it was really entirely up to me and how I handled myself in that situation as to whether or not I would get this job. It wasn't dependent on anyone else. I've always kind of had the idea that, you know, with photography, that the the magic happens in the interaction that I have between myself and my subject. And so nothing outside of that is going to be determinative of the success of it. So it's like, if I can be present within myself and help the subject to relax to the point where they're able to be themselves, then what will happen as a result of that is good photos. And so I don't have to worry about the, you know, if the camera is right, or I mean, I want to be honest here. Obviously, one has to have competence in their camera and on all of the other elements. But the ultimate thing about the success of a photo shoot is what I'm bringing to it and what I'm allowing the subject to bring to it, if that makes any sense. So,
So thank you for telling us about that. And that actually goes into something that I wanted to ask you about later already. So I'm gonna translate that first. Also, Steve hatte eine Freundin, die eine Kunstsammlerin war, und die hatte diese Jacke für Michael, die ihr auf dem eingeblendeten Bild seht. Die hat Steve also mit zum Shooting gebracht, zum ersten Treffen mit Michael. Und Michael war wohl ganz angetan davon und auch beeindruckt davon, dass Steven da direkt was mitgebracht hat. Wir können uns auch alle vorstellen, dass er wahrscheinlich das, was er mitgebracht hat, da auch wertgeschätzt hat. Auch wenn man ein bisschen sehen kann, dass die Jacke ihm etwas zu klein ist. Also die Person, für die diese Jacke ursprünglich mal war, muss winzig gewesen sein.
Wenn sie noch nicht mal Michael passt.
Genau, also Michael ist jetzt nicht der muskulöseste, größte gewesen. Und wenn Michael da schon die Jacke so zuhalten muss und die Ärmel zu kurz sind, dann war das eine Mini-Person, die ursprünglich getragen hat. Auf jeden Fall hat Steve erzählt, dass er schon erstmal nervös war, natürlich bei diesem ersten Treffen, aber dass es so generell seine Einstellung und seine Philosophie im Leben ist, sich zu sagen, dass er genau auf das zugehen sollte, wovor er Angst hat, dass er sich seinen Ängsten stellt und dass es jetzt halt wirklich auf ihn ankommt, nicht von irgendjemand anders abhängt, ob dieser Fotoshoot gut wird, ob diese Bilder gut werden, sondern wirklich von ihm abhängt und nicht mal so sehr von seiner Expertise als Fotograf im Sinne von richtige Kamera, Linse, Einstellungen und so weiter. Das gehört natürlich dazu, das sind die Basics. Aber im Grunde sagt er, die Magie liegt darin, wie er mit jemandem, den er fotografiert, interagiert. Also was er mit in das Shooting bringt und was er dann auch zulässt, dass die andere Person, die er fotografiert, mitbringt. Und die Magie, denke ich, kommt schon bei dem ersten Bild, das wir hier besprechen, gut rüber. Das ist
Ja,
ganz
Ja,
intensiv.
denke ich auch,
das
ja.
stimmt.
So you mentioned that it's important, like what happens in the interaction with you and the subject that you're taking pictures of. And is there anything else that you would say is especially important when taking pictures of people?
At that point in my career, we were still shooting film, so putting film in the camera is very, very important. Sorry. Um, I think that creating an environment, and with Michael, it was always interesting because frequently there would be just a bunch of different people in the room. You know, I always had two assistants. Michael always had a video crew that was documenting all of his shoots. There was the very first shoot, he did not have his hair and makeup people there. He had done his own makeup for that. But every subsequent shoot, his hair and makeup people were there. Frequently, Bob Jones was there. A lot of times, people from Sony were there, and so there were a lot of people, and what I had to do was, you know, work on just having a more intimacy between him and I, and that was challenging. And but I think that it's funny, in the months that we were doing the portrait sessions, which was while he was in New York recording the history record. um, it, it took a while, but I think that we grew more and more comfortable with each other and kind of got comfortable with each other's rhythms and stuff like that. One of the things that was, and I have only talked about this a few times, when they told me I had the job, like if you get hired to do a job, there's an onboarding process. There's like, okay, these are sort of the parameters of what your job is, and this is what to expect, and this is what we expect of you, and this is our procedures, and a lot of, like, organizations, they'll have a whole book of, these are the way that we do things. And I never received any of that with Michael. I had to figure out everything on my own. And, you know, unfortunately, there were different factions within Michael's organization that I didn't, because I had only been the assistant before, I didn't know all of the inner office politics and stuff like that. And I immediately got thrown into just some weird situations with that, just kind of with logistical things. Um, what hotel I was going to stay at in New York when I would go there, and stuff like that. And I was utterly unprepared for that. I just had no idea. Um, when I would go to the Hit Factory to have a meeting with Michael, um, I would sometimes have, I would sometimes wait an hour, 2 hours in the like a waiting area, waiting for Michael to be free and all of that. And I, you know, in retrospect, I wish that I had asked him if I could come and just bring a camera in and just photograph him at work and do kind of fly on the wall pictures. I didn't do that, and that's one of the things that I sort of regret. The way that I am now with more experience and maturity, I I love I love getting the opportunity to sort of do more candid things, and I wish that I had done that. That kind of took me off the field from where you were talking about what your question was. So I'm going to stop there and let you translate that, and then see if you've got any follow-ups to what I.
All right, thank you. But
answered.
those details were super interesting. Thank you. Also abgesehen davon sagt Steve, dass man natürlich damals dran denken musste, auch einen Film in die Kamera zu legen, war es beim Fotografieren einfach super wichtig, trotz allem noch eine Art intime Atmosphäre herzustellen, denn es waren in der Regel ganz viele Leute mit im Raum und das soll man ja auf den Fotos nicht merken, dass er zum Beispiel in der Regel 2 Assistenten dabei hatte, in der Regel auch Michaels Videocrew dabei war, die ja alles gefilmt hat. Normalerweise dann auch noch seine Herren Make-up-Leute. Bei dem Bild, das wir eben gesehen haben, hat er wohl sein eigenes Make-up gemacht, aber ansonsten später waren die ja immer da. Dann war oft Bob Jones dabei, Leute von Sony, also ein Riesenzirkus, könnte man sagen. Und trotzdem muss ja irgendwie die Atmosphäre stimmen. Und das muss man natürlich hinkriegen als Fotograf.
Und auch irgendwie Intimität schaffen, ne?
Ja,
Das ist
genau.
Ja.
Also man will ja nachher als Betrachter des Bildes das Gefühl haben, da ist was zwischen Michael Jackson und mir entstanden.
Genau.
Der guckt jetzt mir in die Augen oder sowas und nicht, da sind halt 20 Leute, mit denen Michael Jackson sich gerade beschäftigt.
Mhm. Ja.
Und Steve hat dann noch erzählt, dass er in dieser Zeit, in den Monaten, in denen er die Porträts von Michael in New York aufgenommen hat, gemerkt hat, dass die beiden immer sich immer mehr aneinander gewöhnt haben, dass es ihnen beiden immer leichter fiel miteinander mit der Zeit. Und das alles, obwohl Steve total ins kalte Wasser geschmissen wurde. Denn normalerweise kennen wir das ja alle, wenn wir irgendwo einen neuen Job anfangen, dann gibt es erstmal so eine Art Einführung, so machen wir das hier. Manchmal gibt es da ja richtige Kurse für, die man belegen muss. Manchmal bekommt man ein Regelbuch in die Hand gedrückt, wie auch immer. Bei ihm wurde das offenbar alles übersprungen. Und er war ja vorher nur Assistent des Fotografen, der ihm vorausgegangen ist. Das heißt, er kannte nicht all die Details, auf die man dann da achten musste. Und wenn es so Kleinigkeiten waren wie, in welchem Hotel ist er eigentlich, wenn er extra nach New York fährt, um Michael zu fotografieren. Und er hat auch erzählt, dass er manchmal 1 bis 2 Stunden in so einem Wartebereich saß und auf Michael gewartet hat. Und heutzutage würde er sagen, da muss man eigentlich fragen, ob man nicht einfach schon reinkommen kann mit einer Kamera und dann während der Arbeit einfach schon mal schöne Fotos knipsen kann, so ein bisschen Mäuschen spielen kann quasi.
Ja,
und das würden wir
stimmt.
natürlich heute alle wahnsinnig gerne sehen, was dabei rausgekommen wäre.
Ja.
Aber das ist ja auch was man sich mit der Zeit erarbeitet und vielleicht nicht direkt so ein bisschen kaltschnäuzig fragt, wenn man da ganz neu in diesem
Man ja erstmal ein bisschen
bei
zurückhalten.
Michael in der Entourage ist, genau. Aber heutzutage würde er das so machen. So, Steve, you told us a bit about all the people being in the room. Did you interact with any of the musicians, the security, the production team? If yes, what was that like?
Well, the main person I interacted with in security was there had been a change prior to me working there. The head of his security was a guy named Bill Bray, and I knew him from when I was assisting. But then when I started working with him, the head of his security team was, oh gosh, the guy's name is just slipped out of my brain.
Ach, der History Security, wie hieß er denn?
He's
We're all lost.
He's Cajun. He's from New Orleans. or from Louisiana, and he
Mm.
spoke with this really strong Cajun accent.
Wir blenden es dann später ein.
Ja,
Leute, wenn euch gerade einfällt,
it'll
wie der
come to me.
Security-Chef heißt, schreibt es mal in die Kommentare, damit ihr beweisen könnt, dass ihr schlauer seid als wir.
ich weiß es auch eigentlich, aber ich komme auch nicht drauf.
So we all think that we should know it, but neither of us can think of the name right now.
Right. And what's really funny about that fellow, and it'll come to me, what was really funny about that fellow was that he sort of like I've found no trace of him on the internet. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know how much after my time with Michael was over. I don't know how much longer he worked with Michael, but you don't see like the only time I see him is sometimes in looking at footage from that time. You'll see him, oh, there he is right there, and all of that. But he was the fellow that when I wanted to talk to Michael, I would speak to him first. When Michael wanted to talk to me, usually he would call and say, Michael wants to talk to you. Um, and and I know that sometime before the end of our recording, I will remember his name and we can just drop it in.
Yeah.
Of course. Did you interact with any of the other team members on the history project?
A little bit with Brad Sundberg, a little bit with oh my gosh, my brain is not working today. Um,
Can we help?
no, well, it's going to be so embarrassing when I do remember it, and and it's like, well, of
That's okay.
course.
Just say it's a quiz.
The kind of the assistant producer that worked that came into Michael's world through Quincy, like Quincy's right hand man.
Do you mean Bruce Swedien?
That's who I mean. And actually it's funny because Bruce, when we did the and this is jumping out of the timeline, but when we did the smile cover, Bruce had this little video that was kind of like a mixture of Chaplin and of Michael, and and Bruce showed it to me on his computer, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And it sort of it was like this is what we're trying to do with
Wow.
the smile thing. And that's never seen the light of day. I don't know what happened with that or whatever, but that was the only time I ever had really any conversation with Bruce, and it was just Bruce and Michael and I in
Mhm.
Michael's lounge at the in the recording studio.
That's so cool that he shared that.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
bodyguard, was it Wayne? Wayne?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
Wow.
Now I'm happy.
Yay,
Okay.
you get the prize for remembering.
Thank you,
you,
Jenny. Also, wir haben gerade darüber gesprochen, inwiefern Steven noch mit anderen Leuten vom Team interagiert hat und wie das so war. Und er hat uns erzählt, dass er ja Bill Bray vom Security-Team vorher schon kannte aus seiner Zeit als Assistent, aber der wurde ja dann gerade quasi abgelöst von Wayne, wie Jenny zum Glück sich jetzt erinnert hat. Wir kamen eben alle nicht auf den Namen. Und Steve hat erzählt, dass er danach nochmal geschaut hat, ob er den online finden kann, was er jetzt inzwischen so macht. Und man findet wohl nichts über ihn. Also er scheint ein Gespenst zu sein, was Online-Präsenz angeht. Ansonsten hat er zwischendurch mal ein bisschen mit Brad Sundberg zu tun gehabt, den ihr ja wahrscheinlich auch alle kennt. Und mit Bruce Swedien hat er eine kleine Begebenheit erzählt, nämlich, dass Bruce ihm ein Video gezeigt hat, das so eine Mischung aus Michael und Charlie Chaplin war. Und das war ja genau das, was Steve mit Michael für das Smile-Cover machen wollte. All right. What's your favorite memory from your time with Michael? Or one of your favorites? A cherished memory, maybe.
Well, There are many. The cherished ones were moments when we just were talking. Um, and there were a couple of times. So where we would do the photography sessions was at Sony Music Studios, which was just down. It's on West 54th. It was on West 54th, just down the street from the Hit Factory. And when um, when we were when we were there, that it was, you know, go in there and do the photography and all of that, and then, you know, Michael would leave and I would have to have, with my assistants, we would tear down the studio and go on. But when I would have meetings with Michael, it would be over at the Hit Factory, and it would be in his lounge. And I remember one day um, I had become friends with several of the people that worked at Sony Music Studios, and they had said, "Hey, we're going to go out to this cool place for dinner. Let's, you know, would you like to join us?" And I thought that was very nice. And so we had gone to this restaurant, and it was a Chinese restaurant, and all of the wait staff were all drag queens. And where I grew up in Michigan, I did not have a lot of experience of knowing or seeing drag queens. And I was just kind of like, and so the next day I had a meeting with Michael at the Hit Factory, and we talked about our business and all of that. And I said, "Oh my gosh, Michael, we should go to this place that I went last night for dinner." And I told him all about it, and we were kind of like, "Oh, that would be so much fun." And all of a sudden it was just like the excitement and the enthusiasm just kind of left Michael, and he said, "Oh, I couldn't do that."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, why?" And I sort of looked at him and I said, "Security." And he said, "Yeah, that I couldn't go
Mhm.
someplace like that."
Mhm.
And
Wow. Mm.
and I said, "You know, Michael," I said, "You know that I admire what you do and 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 all of that." I said, "But there's no way that I would trade places with you." And that kind of got his attention. And he said, "Why is that, Steve?" And I said, "Well, because when I walk out of here, I can walk up to Fifth Avenue and I can walk down Fifth Avenue and nobody knows who I am." I said, and through working with you, I treasure that. I treasure that I can have my anonymity and I can go anywhere that I want to, and I don't have to think about security and those things. And in that moment, I felt like that he understood that I understood him and understood what his reality was. And that's that's probably one of the most treasured moments, and it's led me to a really a lifelong like observation of just what we do to people that become celebrities. And like if I see somebody out in the, you know, walking down the street that's a famous person, I might nod in recognition, but I try not to ask them. I never ask anybody for an autograph. I will never ask anybody for a selfie with them, because I want them to have just a little bit of the anonymity that I have and the ability that I have to go and walk down the street unmolested. Um, and so and I got that. It's like that's a life lesson that I learned from my experience of working with Michael. And I'm really, really glad. I don't think that I would have that understanding if not for just the what I saw in working with him and that exchange that I had with him.
Yeah, I think that's something that we as fans learned through following his life too. Thank
Mhm.
you for sharing that. Also, Steven hat gerade auf die Frage nach einer seiner Lieblingserinnerungen an seine Zeit mit Michael erzählt. dass es natürlich diese Momente gab, in denen sie sich einfach mal unterhalten haben. Die Shootings waren bei Sony Music, aber er hat sich auch einfach in der Hit Factory natürlich mit Michael getroffen, um sich zu besprechen. Und dann gab es diesen Moment, in dem er von einem Abendessen mit anderen erzählt hat. Da war er vorher in einem chinesischen Restaurant und es hat sich herausgestellt, dass die Bedienungen alle Drag Queens waren, was für Steve jetzt nicht gerade Just Another Tuesday war, also nichts, was er so gewohnt war, sondern wo er große Augen gemacht hat als jemand, der aus Michigan kommt und die große Welt so erlebt. Und dann hat er wohl Michael davon eben erzählt und sie haben erstmal beide ganz begeistert den Gedanken gesponnen, dass sie da mal zusammen hingehen müssten, dass Michael da auch eine Menge Spaß dran hätte. Und dann ist aber wohl mit einem Mal diese ganze Freude und Aufgeregtheit aus Michaels Gesicht gefallen. Und er hat gesagt, er könnte es halt niemals machen. Und Steven hat auch direkt verstanden, dass es natürlich aus Sicherheitsgründen einfach nicht geht. Und dann hat er Michael wohl sehr offen gesagt, dass er niemals den Platz mit ihm tauschen würde, dass er niemals sein Leben leben wollen würde. Und Michael hat dann danach gehakt und Steve hat ihm erklärt, weißt du, wenn ich hier rausgehe, dann kann ich die größten Straßen lang gehen und niemand weiß, wer ich bin. Ich bin anonym, ich kann einfach mein Leben so leben, wie ich das möchte, weil mich niemand erkennt. Und ihm ist da sehr bewusst geworden, durch diese Arbeit mit Michael, was das bedeutet, wenn man das eben nicht kann. Und er sagt, es war für ihn wirklich so eine lebenswichtige Erfahrung sozusagen, also eine, die er sein ganzes weiteres Leben mit sich getragen hat und immer wieder beobachtet hat, wie Menschen mit berühmten Leuten umgehen, weswegen er auch niemals jemanden nach einem Selfie gefragt hat, einem gemeinsamen oder nach einem Autogramm gefragt hat. Wenn er irgendwo jemandem Berühmtes begegnet ist, dann hat er vielleicht zugenickt, aber die Leute ansonsten in Ruhe gelassen, damit die einfach ihr Leben leben können. Und in dem Moment mit Michael war es wohl so, dass das so ein Moment war, in dem klar war, die verstehen einander, da ist eine gemeinsame Ebene. Und das war ja für Michael, wie wir alle wissen, immer was ja nicht so selbstverständlich ist, dass Leute begreifen, wie sein Leben ist. Ähm, und deswegen auch ein ganz wichtiger emotionaler Moment in dem Zusammensein dieser beiden.
Ja, sehr schön.
Wow.
Steve, so we're all touched by the moment that you shared with Michael.
Well, and it's funny because there's I'm always happy for the lessons that I've learned in my life, but I carry just a sadness. Michael and I spoke about, we spoke about his childhood. We spoke about our relationships with our fathers. At the time that I worked with Michael, my father and I were not speaking to each other. And so we kind of related and connected on that. Um, but I always sort of felt just a real that there was a sadness that was underlying a lot of the things. Michael and I laughed too when we told jokes and stuff like that. And I remember one time in the in the studio when I was directing him, I said, Michael, move your booty that way. And he laughed so hard. He was like, just because I think that he just was surprised to hear that word come out of my mouth. And so there were times that were joking and stuff like that, but a big part of what I took from Michael were just sort of the conversations that we had, which weren't a lot. I don't consider that we were friends. I think that if I had worked for him longer, we could have become friends. But I think that I was just really fortunate to have a handful of times when we connected on a level that was more than just, uh, you know, he was my client, and you know, and all of that, and for those were really, really special moments to me.
Did he ever prank you?
No, he didn't. That's maybe I didn't make it to that inner circle that got to get pranked.
Maybe that's kind of initiation or something. Okay, Steve hat gerade noch mal erzählt, dass er ja nicht so lange für Michael gearbeitet hat, dass es wirklich zu einer Freundschaft gekommen wäre. Er hatte aber das Gefühl, dass sie sich gut genug verstanden haben, dass sich das eventuell hätte entwickeln können, weil sie sich wohl die paar Male, die sie sich unterhalten haben, auch über sehr persönliche Themen unterhalten haben, wie ihre Kindheit, die Beziehung zu ihren Vätern. Steven hatte damals selber eine Zeit, in der er mit seinem Vater nicht gesprochen hat. Und da war natürlich eine gewisse Verbindung zwischen den beiden. Aber er betont auch, dass es neben all dieser Traurigkeit, dieser Schwere auch einfach lustige Momente gab, dass viel gelacht wurde, dass er zum Beispiel bei einem Shooting einfach mal zu Michael gesagt hat, beweg mal deinen Hintern so rum, und Michael muss total gelacht haben, weil er einfach diesen Begriff nicht erwartet hat in dem Moment. Also da sieht man wieder diese beiden Facetten, die wir ja von Michael aus verschiedenen Geschichten, die Leute über ihn erzählen, so kennen, ne? Dass er diese unglaubliche Schwere, aber auch diese unglaubliche Leichtigkeit hatte. Steve, what's something that you're proud of in your collaboration with Michael?
I think the thing I'm most proud of probably is the smile cover, and the, you know, just the way that it came about, and that it was the most direct, it was the most direct collaboration between him and I, as far as, you know, he and the story, which I have told many times, but um Michael called me up. I was in the hotel, and Michael called me up and said, "Steve, I need to talk to you. Come to the apartment." And so I walked over to Trump Tower and went up, and Michael's apartment was in the second from the top floor, and and I got there, and Michael's chef was there, and he and I chatted for a little while, and then Michael came in, and the chef said, "Hey, I've got to go." And so it was just Michael and I, and that was rare. There was not, you know, there was no security around or anything like that. It was just Michael and I. And Michael asked if I knew the song. Well, we chatted for a little while. We just, you know, made small talk, and then he said, "Steve, do you know the song Smile?" And I said, "I think so." And he just started singing it. He said, "I'll sing it for you."
Wow.
And he sang it, you know, obviously a cappella and without any warm up. And I'm standing maybe, you know, 1.5 meters away from him. And I'm just kind of like, oh my God. And the hair on my arms was standing up, and I was like, where do I look? Where, you know, do I stare at him, or do I look off? And I like really, I was so
Wow.
unprepared for that. And then he just, when he finished, he's like, that song. And I and like I didn't even really have time to, I didn't say that was amazing or anything like that. I just was like, yeah, yeah, Michael, I know that song. And he just continued on with this business meeting, and he proceeded to tell me about, he asked if I knew who wrote the song. I said, I have no idea. He said, well, the music was written by Charlie Chaplin. I was like, oh, I had no idea. And then he proceeded to give me about an hour and a half of stories about Charlie Chaplin, and about the film The Kid, and about the child actor who was in The Kid, and um, and the like kind of the historical significance of that child actor, that his money had been basically spent by his mother and stepfather, and that the American authorities had had created laws to protect child actors and child performers, that was, that Michael had a debt of gratitude to that child actor for having gone through that, because his money was protected from, when he became of age, he had money that he could, work with, and all of that. And and actually, I'm going to pause right there because poor Vanita has to translate. So I'll let her translate, and then I'll continue with the story from there. Was that kind of me to do for you, Vanita?
That's super kind, but that's totally fine too. Okay. Also Steven hat uns gerade auf die Frage nach etwas, worauf er besonders stolz ist in seiner Zusammenarbeit mit Michael, gesagt, dass das besonders auf das Smile-Cover zutrifft. Und dann hat er uns da die Hintergrundgeschichte erzählt. Und zwar war es wohl so, dass Michael ihn anrief und quasi zu sich bestellt hat in den Trump Tower. Er ist dann da erstmal auf den Koch getroffen, hat sich mit dem kurz unterhalten, dann hat er den Raum verlassen, Michael war da und den waren die zwei wirklich alleine. Also es war wohl ganz selten so, dass da keine Security und auch sonst niemand dabei war. Und Michael fragte ihn, ob er denn den Song Smile kenne. Und um da sicher zu gehen, hat Michael ihm den einfach mal vorgesungen aus dem Stegreif, aus
A
ungefähr
cappella.
1,5 Meter Entfernung.
Das muss ein Moment gewesen
Wie man
sein.
das so macht. Also Steve beschreibt, dass er total Gänsehaut hatte und auch unsicher war, soll er ihn jetzt die ganze Zeit angucken, soll er weggucken, was macht man jetzt eigentlich in so einem Moment? Und hat ihm dann hinterher wohl erstmal gesagt, so ja, dass er den Song kennt, und dann hat Michael einfach das Treffen fortgesetzt und so ganz businesslike weitergesprochen. Ob er denn auch wüsste, von wem die Musik stammt und so weiter, und hat ihm dann erklärt, ja, dass es eben Charlie Chaplin war. Dann hat er ihm von dem Film The Kid erzählt und dass der junge Darsteller in dem Film, der eben ein Kind war, damals die sehr unglückliche Erfahrung gemacht hat, dass es nicht er war, der dann seine Gage da ausgegeben hat. Und dass das wohl der Anlass dafür war, dass Gesetze geschaffen wurden, die Kinder im Showbusiness schützen. Und dass Michael deswegen auch fand, dass er sozusagen in dessen Schuld stehe, weil er selber dadurch besser geschützt wurde als eben der junge Darsteller aus dem Charlie Chaplin-Film.
Wahnsinn.
Ja.
So at that point, Michael walked over to the bookshelf and he pulled up a book and he turned it to a page, and he said, "This film right here, this was the kid." And he and basically it was a photograph of Chaplin and the child, whose name was Jackie Coogan, sitting on a stoop. And he said, "What I want to do is I want to recreate this." So he said, "What I need you to do, Steve, is I need you to go and buy a copy of this picture." And he gave me an address of a place in the East Village that sells movie memorabilia. And he said, "And I need you to hire a set builder to build this set. And we need to cast a child, and we need to," and he said, "as far as the costume, I have Michael Bush working on all of the costumes and everything for it. And as soon as we have the child cast, we'll get his sizes and do all that." And so we went, we went over everything I had to do, and it was really, really exciting for me, because like there are two different parts of being a photographer there's the part where you just go in and take the pictures, but then additionally, there's the producing of it. And the producing of it is a completely different, it's a different side of my brain, and it's a different skill set where you have to anticipate all of the different things that are needed to make a photo shoot happen. And you have to have all of them together in one place at the right time. Everything has to be working and all of that. And that's really, really exciting. It's hard. In many ways, for me, it's harder work than the actual photography part of it. And if any one item isn't right, or if any one part of it doesn't come together, then you need to be able to think on your feet and say, okay, well, how are we going to make it happen without this thing and all of that? And it's funny because for me, the days of things are sort of lost. I don't remember the exact day that we did that shoot, but eventually all of the items were pulled together, and I flew back to New York, and we did the photo shoot, and it was pretty magical as far as like to be able to see what Michael had envisioned and bring all of the elements together, and all of that was really pretty exciting and pretty wonderful. Um, and as often happened with with a lot of the things that I did for Michael, um, we'd shoot it, I'd turn the film over, and then I just wouldn't like they didn't call me up and say, okay, this is our timeline, this is when we're going to release this single, this is what we're doing with this is what we're doing with that. It was just I would shoot the pictures, and then I would be on to whatever the next thing was. So there wasn't a lot of time to stop and reflect on things. um, there wasn't really a lot of time to stop and reflect on things in a big picture way until after my time with Michael was over. And certainly after Michael passed away, I spent a lot of time really, really sort of evaluating my feelings and my observations and things like that. But it was at the time, things when people ask me, how did it feel for this, or how did it feel for that, a lot of times I don't remember. I remember like in retrospect, but it's like I don't even know how I felt at the time. It was just so fast moving and exciting and all of that. And one of the things we haven't talked about, which we'll probably get to, is the experience of working on the teaser in Budapest, and like that's just a giant blur to me. And so it's hard to put all of it into the correct context. So
Understandable, of course. Also Steve hat uns gerade erklärt, dass Michael ihm ein Buch gezeigt hat, um ihm ja darzulegen, so hier ist ein Bild von dem Film von Charlie Chaplin. Ihr kennt ja alle die Aufnahme mit Charlie Chaplin und dem Kind, die da nebeneinander sitzen. Und Michaels Aufforderung war jetzt quasi, geh los, kauf einen Druck von diesem Bild. Ich will genau das da nachstellen. Das heißt, er hatte jemanden, der ihm genau so ein Set zu bauen hatte. Er hatte ja Michael Bush für die Kostüme, damit die authentisch aussehen. Sie waren dabei, ein Kind zu casten, das dann dazu passt. Und jetzt musste Steven eben genau rausfinden, was seine Rolle dann da ist. Und da hat er erklärt, das eine ist natürlich einfach die Bilder zu schießen, aber das andere ist der Produktionsteil, der da vorkommt, bei dem es ja auch seine Aufgabe ist, zu antizipieren, was alles gebraucht wird, was wo sein muss, alles rechtzeitig fertig zu haben und dann, wenn irgendwas ist, sich auch immer noch mal schnell irgendwie eine Lösung für Gegebenheiten einfallen zu lassen. Und er beschreibt, dass das zwar härtere Arbeit war als das eigentliche Fotos machen, aber eben auch der aufregende Teil für ihn, die Herausforderung. Und dass da aber so viel zu tun war und alles so schnell hintereinander passiert ist, dass er an die einzelnen Tage und erst recht an die einzelnen Gefühle in bestimmten Momenten oft gar keine detaillierte Erinnerung hat, dass es alles so mehr oder weniger in der Erinnerung verschwimmt, weil er damals gar nicht die Zeit hatte, sich da auch noch Gedanken drüber zu machen, irgendwie auf eine Metaebene zu gehen, sondern dass er erst, nachdem diese ganzen Arbeiten abgeschlossen waren und besonders nach Michaels Tod dann nochmal wirklich reflektiert hat, was er da eigentlich alles erlebt hat und wie er das erlebt hat. Und dass die Leute ihn dann oft so nach ganz spezifischen Momenten fragen und er das gar nicht mehr so einzeln zuordnen kann. Manche Sachen natürlich, die sich besonders eingegraben haben, aber andere Sachen, wie gesagt, verschwimmen für ihn dann einfach, weil er in der Zeit damals sich keine Gedanken darüber machen konnte. Vor lauter, es passiert schon wieder was Neues.
Vor lauter Erlebnissen quasi.
Ja, genau. Ja.
Und da hat er schon darauf angespielt, dass er ja auch den Teaser für das History-Album in Budapest für Michael dokumentiert hat und dass das besonders auch eine Zeit war, die ihm verschwimmt, in der einfach viel zu viel auf einmal passiert ist. Aber da wollen wir doch mal gucken, was da noch hängen geblieben ist.
Episch auf jeden Fall.
Ja. So we just agreed that the teaser that you mentioned before for the history album is epic. And you mentioned that that time is one giant blur, but maybe there are a few memories that you can share about it.
So this was the thing that was really interesting about that was that so when I did the first test shoot with Michael, when I showed the jacket, when the film came back, I gave it to Bob Jones, and he was like, "Well, Michael likes you," and I said, and basically that was when they said, "You've got the job," and then I didn't hear anything for like weeks, and I was like, "Okay, well." And in the meantime, I still had to work, and so I was assisting other photographers. At the time, I assisted a guy named Neil Preston, who was just a great friend and mentor to me. And and I was just waiting to hear from something from them. And then one Saturday morning, my phone rang, and it was Wayne. Thank you, Jenny, for helping me remember Wayne. And Wayne said, "Mike wants to talk to you. Make sure you're around this afternoon." I was like, "Okay." And so I'm just kind of hanging out in my apartment, and sometime around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the phone rang, and it was Wayne again. He said, "Hold on for Michael." And Michael came on, and he said, "Steve, I can't do Michael's voice. I've tried, and it's embarrassing, so I won't attempt it."
We can imagine.
We would have to ask Chris Tucker. I think he does it quite well.
Yes, he does. So Wayne said to me, or Michael said to me, "Steve, you're going to take tomorrow night, you're going to take the red eye to New York. And on Monday, we're doing a photo shoot with Lisa Marie and myself in the apartment. And then the next day, we're going to fly to Budapest, and we're going to work on a short film there. And I need you to be there to photograph it." And I was like, "Okay."
So drop everything.
Yeah, well, and so I had to get on the phone and call a place in New York to rent a bunch of equipment for doing a photo shoot with Michael in Trump Tower. And then I had to make sure I had enough film to shoot this film in Budapest. And, and just had to produce basically two photo shoots with very, very little notice. And, and the shoot in New York was interesting. It was my first time meeting Lisa Marie, and it was the first of my opportunities to learn that I didn't really know what certain protocols were. When I got the kit of equipment that I was supposed to get, um, in they were supposed to send it to Trump Tower. There was something missing, and it was an integral part of what I needed. And so I called the rental place and I said, "You need to send me this." And the rental place must have had contact with one of the what do you call it, like the news magazine type things. And suddenly Lisa's like, Steve, why is this on TV? And
Oh.
basically that there were news media outside like, oh, special delivery for a photo shoot that Michael's doing in Trump Tower and all of that. And I was like, oh my goodness, I, and it was the beginning of knowing that I had to just be careful. And so that happened. I don't think that Lisa ever liked me from that day on,
Oh,
but
God.
that's okay. Um, but it's kind of like a testament to my own ignorance. I just
Mm,
wasn't, I was not prepared for that, for,
mm.
just for like that world. Um, but we did the shoot. There's some funny stories about that, but we did the shoot. The next day, I got on a plane with Wayne, and it was interesting because back in those days when we had paper tickets, they had the price that they paid for the plane ticket to
Oh.
fly round trip from New York to Budapest. They had bought the ticket the day before, and it was first class. And I looked down and they had paid, I think, over $20,000 for my plane ticket.
Okay.
At this time, wow. Still today, but wow.
And I was just like, oh my God. And and it was just like in that way, it was pretty surreal. And so we get to Budapest, and Michael came later. He got there that night, and actually one of the pictures that I have, oh, actually, no, that I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. I have a picture of Michael and Lisa Marie, and that was from one of the things that happened during the week that we were there in Budapest, where they went to a hospital and brought gifts for the children in the hospital, and this was them coming out of the hospital, and that was what that picture was from. Um, but my biggest memory of that, first of all, one of the things, actually, Vanita, do you want me to pause there and then come
You
back
can go
to?
on. I'm taking notes.
Okay, okay, I'm so impressed. Um, so when we got there and I got checked into the hotel and all of that, um, I met with the production team that was doing this, and the director and the director of photography, the cinematographer, were like, please let us know if you see anything that we're doing wrong with our lighting. And my own personal feeling with cinematographers is that they're to me godlike in their ability to light, and to be asked that especially when I had just barely started the job and all of that. But part of what I realized in retrospect was that for the years that I was working as Michael's photographer's assistant, I wasn't deciding what the lighting was going to be, but I was setting it up. And so I knew exactly what Michael was looking for. And I think that that was a portion of why he hired me for the job, was that he knew that I knew how he wanted to be lit. Um, it was it was just everything happened so fast there. And it was funny because there were, when I had been on tour, I had met a bunch of fans from Europe, and many of them actually showed up in Budapest, and I got to be reunited with a few people that I had not seen since the tour, and that was kind of fun. Um, Sadly, there were some people that worked for Michael that didn't have a lot of respect for the fans, that kind of were very dismissive and rolled their eyes and stuff like that. Myself, I just was always intrigued that somebody would care about an artist so much that they would follow him. I mean, these were people from Europe that were following Michael all around South America. And I was like, wow. And at the same time, I was surprised that they would be in a city as amazing as Buenos Aires or Santiago, Chile, and not be out enjoying what those cities had to offer, but instead we're hanging out in front of Michael's hotel waiting for Michael to do something. And I kind of was always encouraging them to go out and experience the cities that we were in. But anyway, I got to get reacquainted with several of the fans um, while we were in Budapest, and that was really nice. So I'll stop there and let you
All
translate
right.
everything I just said.
Okay, you can take a break, catch your breath. This is gonna take a moment. Steve hat gerade erzählt, also er hat wieder angesetzt bei diesem Testshooting, das er mit Michael gemacht hat, mit der blauen Jacke, über das wir eben ja schon gesprochen haben, dass danach Bob Jones ihm nochmal Bescheid gesagt hat, ja, Michael mag dich, mag deine Arbeit, und dann kam aber erstmal nichts. Und natürlich hat er darauf gewartet, dass dann irgendwie noch was kommt. Also es hieß, du hast den Job, aber es gab noch keine konkreteren Infos, wann denn jetzt was irgendwie passieren sollte. Und in der Zeit hat er natürlich seine Rechnung zu bezahlen, also hat er auch weiterhin gearbeitet, war weiterhin erstmal Assistent für einen anderen Fotografen und hoffte darauf, dass das Team von Michael sich meldet. Und dann hat Wayne ihn tatsächlich angerufen und gesagt so, ja, halt dich mal bereit, heute Nachmittag will Michael mit dir sprechen, auch ohne konkrete Uhrzeit. Also saß Steve zu Hause rum und wartete, dass Michael sich meldet. Und er rief dann aber auch an und forderte ihn auf, noch am nächsten Tag sofort nach New York zu kommen. Und am Montag wäre dann da Fotoshooting mit Lisa Marie und danach geht es dann nach Budapest, um da den Teaser zu machen. Und da muss er natürlich mit. Das heißt, er hatte jetzt ganz wenig Vorlauf, um alles zu organisieren. Das heißt, er musste in New York eine Firma finden, wo er das Equipment mieten konnte, da sich überlegen, was er jetzt im Grunde für 2 verschiedene Fotoshootings brauchen würde und das alles zusammenkriegen. Und dann war es tatsächlich so, dass das Equipment geliefert wurde zum Trump Tower, aber ein wichtiger Teil fehlte. Das heißt, er musste sich dann doch nochmal mit dieser Firma, bei der er gemietet hat, auseinandersetzen. Und da gab es dann so einen Vorfall, durch den ihm nochmal klar geworden ist, dass er die Protokolle, die in der Arbeit mit so einem Megastar gelten, einfach noch nicht kannte und dass ihm die auch keiner gesagt hatte. Denn die Leute von dieser Firma, mit der er gesprochen hat, haben das offenbar an die Medien durchgestochen. Und dann lief da im Fernsehen der Bericht darüber, ach, hier wird Equipment für ein Fotoshooting geliefert, blablablub, Michael Jackson. Und Lisa Marie war wohl nicht so richtig glücklich, dass das im Fernsehen lief, noch bevor das Fotoshooting überhaupt stattgefunden hatte.
Not amused.
Ja. Und Steve hatte dann leider den Eindruck, dass sie ihn ab da nicht wirklich leiden konnte. Michael scheint das ja aber nicht von ihm abgebracht zu haben. Der hat sich das auch richtig was kosten lassen, Steve da so kurzfristig mit nach Budapest zu fliegen. Steve sprach davon, dass auf seinem Flugticket für die erste Klasse hin und zurück ein Preis von über $20.000 stand.
Wahnsinn.
Was man halt mal eben so in der Portokasse hat.
Und ich freue mich immer, wenn ich einen Flug für 500 Euro kriege.
Und
Ja.
Wir haben dann noch kurz über ein Foto gesprochen, das dann auch aus Budapest stammt von Michael und Lisa Marie. Da haben sie ein Krankenhaus besucht und Geschenke vorbeigebracht. Ja, und im Hotel hat Steve dann das Produktionsteam des Teasers getroffen. Und die Leute, die dafür zuständig waren, haben dann tatsächlich wohl ihn darum gebeten, wenn sie irgendwas mit dem Licht oder Ähnlichem falsch machen würden, dann soll er ihnen das bitte sagen. Und er war so ein bisschen so, aber ihr seid doch die großen Videoproduzenten, die alles können. Und war da immer ganz beeindruckt von denen. Aber er führt es darauf zurück, dass er offenbar ein Gespür dafür hatte, wie Michael beleuchtet und in Szene gesetzt werden wollte, dass er das bei seinen Shootings halt richtig gemacht hat und dass anderen Leuten das aufgefallen ist und sie deswegen auch ihn um Rat gefragt haben.
Mhm.
Und dann hat er noch erzählt, dass er ja bei der Tour vorher schon europäische Fans kennengelernt hatte, die er da jetzt teilweise wieder getroffen hat, weil die dann natürlich nach Budapest gekommen sind, als sie mitbekommen haben, dass Michael da ist. Andere Leute aus Michaels Team waren wohl teilweise nicht so begeistert von den Fans. Steve war aber ganz beeindruckt davon, dass es so viele Fans gab, die ihm eben immer gefolgt sind, ne? Die ihm über die halbe Welt ja teilweise nachgereist sind. Und er hat dann auch erzählt, dann sind die in spannenden Städten, ich glaube, er hatte Buenos Aires gesagt zum Beispiel,
Ja.
und gucken sich da nicht die Stadt an, sondern warten vor Michaels Hotel. Und er hat sie dann immer so ein bisschen ermutigt, sich doch auch mal für die Gegend zu interessieren, in der sie da sind. Ja, ich glaube, soweit sind wir gekommen. Habe ich irgendwas vergessen?
Nee, ich glaube, das war super
Das
zusammengefasst.
ist sehr gut zusammengefasst, ja.
Okay.